Right, welcome to this meeting of Council. This meeting will be live streamed and recorded, and the voices and images of those participating in the meeting and in the gallery may be captured as part of this recording. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and pay respects to elders past and present. As councillors, we have all taken an oath to carry out our duties in the best interests of the people of Indigo Shire and to do this in a fair and impartial manner. We are all committed to exercising the council's powers and functions to the best of our skills and judgment. Do we have any apologies? Do we have any declaration of conflict of interest? We'll now proceed to item 5, which is open forum. We've got a number of questions. We'll start off with Richard Crispin. Do you want to just come up to the microphone? Councillor Trenry, could you turn that microphone on, please?
Thank you, Mayor, and for the opportunity to address the Council. It's in conjunction with local roads, and I have put previous email submissions into the Council for grading road. The road in particular to us is Diffie Road, the lower part of Diffie Road, where between the two sealed sections there's 800 metres of dirt. And the question I put to the Council today was we want the Council to increase the priority, not only in upgrading Diffie Road from the previous flood damage, but also sealing the road. And that's because of two things: increased dust hazard that we are particularly living in and starting to affect the health of our horses and ourselves and our home environment, and also the speed and the amount of traffic that is increased on Lower Diffie Road, which is quite increased from the year that we've been there. Also, our local road, Ryan Road, has been graded once by the Council, but it hasn't been resheeted. And again, my second question was to the Council, where we get an increased priority for the resheeting of Ryan Road. Again, for the simple fact that there's a mill, a working joinery up past us that has increased traffic, heavy vehicle traffic, and again, it's outside, right outside our bedroom window, and we're living with the dust hazard. So whilst we don't expect Ryan Road to be sealed in the near term, we do ask that a priority be given to resheet that road for ourselves and our neighbours. And the third question was whether we could have any speed mitigation along Diffie Road, because at the moment the increased traffic, we're all travelling pretty close to 100 kilometres an hour on a dirt section, and I witnessed witnessed one loss of control of the vehicle, short term, on a particular stretch, just coming past Ryan Road. Whether he was dodging an animal or not, I don't know, but it was definitely a lock-up. And the Community Forum Facebook page has noted that there's been some incidents with horse riders and walkers and some bike riders along there with the increased traffic doing in excess of speed. So they're the three questions I wanted to put to the Council. And just to iterate that the situation for us, particularly in this dry weather, has now come down to a health hazard for us and our animals. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I'll put that question to be addressed by the Director of Infrastructure, Ian Allett.
Thanks, Richard, for your question or questions. So, look, I'll answer them in order. The first question just is about any increased priority to sealing the road associated with the post-flood work. So, I guess to separate the issues, and I think you had a conversation with one of my staff this afternoon, the flood repair works are funded by the government, subject to having those assessed, and we've got to wait and see what that looks like. But that is only funding made available to I suppose repair any damage. So that is just really to get the gravel surface and the drains and anything that might have been impacted. The sealing of the road, it's probably goes through the same process of any of our gravel roads across the Shire. There's other people in the gallery tonight, want to talk about Watershed Road, so a little bit of a similar issue, that it's a road that I suppose needs to get to the top of the priority list, and there's things such as traffic volumes and maintenance ability and a whole lot of factors. So I think again, without looking it up today, you've had conversations with some of our staff, and it is sort of on a priority list somewhere, but it's certainly not in our current planning in the next few years to get sealed. So I think in answer to your question, the upcoming assessment, and then if that relates in or results in repairs to the road post-flood is a separate issue to sealing, and that's got to go through its own prioritisation and assessment. So that's the first one. Ryan Road, you've asked about resheeting on that one. So I had a quick look this afternoon just at the data we've got in a spreadsheet, so without putting too much faith in that and not getting out and having a look, but it would seem not to be near the priority list for resheeting. But I guess our resheeting program is very much when the gravel sort of, all bar disappears and we can't maintain it properly with a grader, then that's time for resheeting. So, maybe it needs a grade, maybe it needs some more gravel. If it's been impacted by the December storm, then, it gets assessed with the others, and there could be some resulting resheeting out of that, but I don't know the outcome. But normally, on the point that you've made about increased dust and those sort of things, won't be a factor in resheeting. It's very much about, how much gravel's left and can it be maintained. And your third question relates to speed mitigation. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware where the Shire boundary is, but I think it's about 1.5 km past that corner of Zigzag Road, so the second bit of seal. So a little way down there is where you enter the rural city of Wangaratta. So I guess if I'm reading the wording of your question that talks about the lower half of Diffie Road, I'm visualising probably a section that's largely in the rural city of Wang. And I'm not sure if that's where you meant, but I guess what you've described is vehicles travelling at maybe close to 100k. Look, right at the moment we don't have any plans to do that, but I think we're always open to discussing any safety concerns with residents, and if there's something there about speed, we need to have a look at those. But there's nothing that I'm aware of at the moment. Thank you.
Alan Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've only got one question, and I didn't address it to anybody in particular, but because it probably will fall to Ian, but the Shire does not own a water truck, and it is a big bugbear with me, because the Shire, on the 14th of February, graded Watershed Road, and it is horrendous, the dust. Worse than it was before. The corrugations are back again. If they use the water truck, the grader driver knows what the moisture content is. Engineers don't know. They know what the theory is, but they do not know what the conditions are. You say, oh, well, it could have rained. Right, but they say they start grading when the road is wet, turn grading mud. By dinner time it's good. By the afternoon it's dry. So then they go on to the next road, grade it dry. All because they don't own a water truck. All right, I know a water truck is expensive, but so is a grader blade. Using a grader blade on dry dirt will wear it out very quickly. I've been a contractor. I've owned heavy machinery. I know when I'm getting a snow job too.
Do you have a question there, Alan?
Yeah. Why do the council insist on grading Watershed Road when it's dry?
I'll ask the Director of Infrastructure, Ian Allen.
Thanks, Alan. Look, I'll have a go. I agree with some of your comments there about the moisture. Look, we certainly, I'll come to your question, we certainly try and minimise dry grading. We understand exactly what you've said, that it turns into dust, it's not effective, so getting the right moisture content in the gravel pavement when you grade is optimum. We try and do most of our road maintenance during sort of autumn and spring when there is a bit of moisture. So I understand that the 14th of Feb, which you quoted in there and you said we graded it, I understand that was actually just fairly normal maintenance to pull some of the gravel that's in the drains up onto the pavement so that when we do come and grade it in the autumn, we'll have a bit more material to work with. So, but look, I think your question about why we insist on grading roads when they're dry partly answer that, but it does come down to cost. We don't have the water cart that goes with our grader. We're constantly looking at our plant and equipment and what's the right equipment to own and use. So it does come at an increased cost, and look, we're continuing to monitor that. But right now we don't have that piece of equipment. We manage our grading as best we can through those sort of shoulder months when there is some moisture. Yep.
Thanks, Ellen. Vicky Davis.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. Okay, mine's on Watershed Road as well, so I suppose it's to Ian. Watershed Road is better. It's better now thanks to the little bit of work that was done to it. Since the ratepayers started this project to get it sealed. We have had more rain at times than we had last December. I drove the road to Kangaroo Crossing, through the crossing, and turned around and went back home 2 days after the rain. And the road was passable all the way to El Dorado, because I come home and rang them and they said it was, and it was open to wank. So, and you also have an engineer that works for the council who drives the road regularly to get to work, so he says, and he reckons there's nothing wrong with the road when we started this. So why, after the rain, was our road closed to local traffic only?
I think Ian's keen to answer that. I was going to answer it, but go on.
I'm happy for you,
I don't
Mr
care
Mayor.
who answers it.
I think you find that was a decision of Vic Roads.
A decision, why? The road was passable, it's a council road.
Yeah, look, I'll add to it. It was Vic Roads or Regional Roads Victoria in consultation with council. So as a result of the Golden Ball Bridge road closure, they wanted to manage how much of the traffic that would have otherwise used that sort of spilled out onto the local roads, and particularly the gravel roads. So they wanted most of the traffic to use the arterials, and that's why there was local road traffic.
Well, you better get some money off Vic Roads to seal that road, because it's quite a good road, and if it's good enough for me to drive it, it's good enough for everybody to drive it, as it is in my opinion. So you better get money off them to seal it.
I'm very pleased, Vicky, that you say that the road is better now that council's done that work on it.
Not since they've graded it.
On your letter, it doesn't say a little bit, it just says better.
Well,
but you've got a second question there?
Well, that was to do with, depend on my answer there, but my third question actually is to Councillor O'Connor. At the last meeting, Councillor Jenny, you said that you're very pleased with the changeover for the Meals on Wheels, but I'm just wondering, down in Watershed we have 9 people over 70, one who's had a stroke, and unfortunately 4 of us are getting very close to 70. So my question to you is, will all the services we need come down Watershed Road to keep us in our homes? Meals on Wheels. Now, I have spoken to a lady that does Meals on Wheels sometimes, and she says they will not drive their cars down our dirt road. The district nurse, home help and respite bus. I haven't been able to get any answers.
Okay, thanks, Vicky. So what I was saying in that meeting was that we'd had a report that the transition of HAC services from local government to Alpine at Home had gone very well, and that the current clients were all very, very pleased with that. So I can't answer how it will be into the future because it's not our service now, it's Alpine at Home. I would hope that, just as we're hearing now, the level of services remain at a very high level, that customer satisfaction continues at the level we're hearing, and I would recommend that you ring them, Alpine at Home, and ask them about...
Tried that.
Okay. Yeah, so if you've got an issue with them, I'm afraid you'll have to... you could talk... Have we still got a transition officer? Yeah, if you've got concerns that they're not responding appropriately, please let us know.
Well, I didn't get much satisfaction when I did ring them. You know, I was told that they go to Rutherglen, they go to Stanley, and I said, but, you know, with the dirt road. She said, oh, well, you'll have to all get a microwave and we'll deliver once a week. But to me, that's not what Meals
So
on
Vicky,
Wheels is
I
about.
just can't comment because it's not our
All right,
service
fair
anymore.
enough.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Thank you, Vicky. Ed
But
Torrey.
sorry, just to finish that, if you think that the service is not okay, please let us know. Contact Mark Florence, yeah, and we'll deal with it. Thanks.
Ed Torrey.
Thanks, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. My first question relates to the letters to the Council instigated to the Municipal Association of Victoria and the Murray-Darling Association last year, which together with SRCI independently wrote to the Minister for Water in relation to changes needed to the Water Act to combat impacts on local water. SRCI is continuing to seek meetings with the Water Minister Office to address these issues. As Indigo Shire Council, as the instigator of the letters in both cases, has Council any information as to the responses to MAV and the MDA letters to the Minister?
There's also questions about the MDA and the MAV.
Sorry?
Oh. So the MDA, on their website, it shows the letter that was sent by them to the Minister for Water in last September. They haven't received a reply from the Minister. They contacted the Minister's office today, who stated that the letter was received shortly before going into caretaker mode. And because it went into caretaker mode when the new election happened, it was misplaced, and they've said that they'll respond as a matter of urgency. It's the MDA. Will you do that one? The CEO.
Thanks, Ed. Also included in your question is discussion about MAV. I also note that Council wrote directly to the Minister at some point last year, and around about August last year we got a response from the Minister, so I presume you'll get a similar response, but we'll wait to see what you get. But the Minister was not of a view to review the Water Act as a result of our letter. Some of the things they claim were that the Minister pointed to the Kew Springs VCAT case and stated that the proceedings did not point to a deficiency in how the Act manages groundwater. I'm quoting the Minister here, and it's not us. The Minister points out the community consultation were held for the state government's Water for the Future report. It included support for the entitlement framework and retaining the integrity of water planning arrangements. So the Minister concluded there was no need to review the Act as it is serving the needs of the community in transparently sharing water resources between all users, including the environment. There's a bit more that goes on there, but that's the version we got, and so there was no joy from the Minister at the time. It was about August last year. In regard to the MAV, I'm not sure where that's gone. I know that it was adopted as a motion at their state conference or forum, whatever they call that. So what normally happens there, they have a whole lot of resolutions that are voted on. There's probably dozens of them. And so the ones that get up, they get transferred internally to MAV. They need to come up with an advocacy plan, a strategic approach to following up on a whole lot of these different ones. So I'll need to follow up on where that's up to. We actually, the Mayor and myself, have a meeting with the MAV on Thursday to talk about updating their strategic plan. So we'll use that as an opportunity to raise it then to see how that is going to be incorporated in their strategic plan.
I should probably have another question at the next meeting, because I think that we're pursuing a meeting with the Minister. I'm hopeful that that'll take place in the next month. So we'll have, it just seems to me that to make excuses about letters being mislaid when we wrote 3 weeks ago and got a reply, just seems to me that there's, well, I'll leave it at that. My second question was that given the issues in relation to water, there's been a project underway for at least 12 months, I would have thought, to put in place the fountain, the bubblers around the place, and I just wondered where that project is at.
The Director, Infrastructure.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, look, it's an ongoing program, so we actually did some in the previous year, but this year council allocated $20,000. Prior to Christmas, we were able to get a grant for another $18,000, so that's been able to expand the program. So look, it's ongoing. To date, there's been one installed in Waggunya, and there's 5 more that will be installed in this financial year, so they'll be coming up fairly soon. They're at Lake Samble in Beechworth, Yakandanda near the skate park courthouse precinct, exact location to be confirmed, Golling Square in Rutherglen, Colston Park, Tangambalanga, and at the Rec Reserve in Barnawatha. So they're all happening in the coming weeks and months.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Ed. Item 6, condolences. Do we have any condolences? Item 7, the recommendation is that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 18th of December 2018, as published on the council's website, be confirmed. Do we have someone who moved that? Moved by Councillor Murdoch, seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Is anybody against? Carried. Item 8, is there any business arising from the previous minutes? The Director used to be Corporate Services. The Planning and Corporate Services, Greg Pinkerton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There was an item from the last meeting, being December, relating to a petition that was received from the clients of a business locally who use the Rutherglen Hall, and the question was about the consistency of charges for the hall. So I investigated that, and what I can confirm is that the charging was applied correctly. The issue that seems to have arisen is the consistency of some free access and some additional access that has been given outside of the charge times. So while that's regrettable that there was an inconsistency, I could certainly see that staff were trying to be accommodating, albeit in not consistently over time. So the response in the agenda just sets out what I'd found, and it also says that we're taking steps to improve that from year to year, so that businesses that do hire the hall can have some certainty from year to year about those charges. And I also included, given that this business relates to people in the community being active, I also mentioned council's support for those activities and the active Indigo grants that council's had recently.
Thank you. Do we have any deputations or petitions? Councillor Shepherd.
We did have, Chris Zerps did send us in something that was in a petition form, but it's been really looked at and said because it's a planning decision that we are still working on, that it is being accepted as a submission. So if people are expecting to see a petition to come tonight, it's been accepted as a submission towards that planning keep away.
Thank you. Item 10.1, the recommendation is that Council accepts the year-to-date January Finance and Performance Report noting the progress against Council's annual Council Plan Action List, Advocacy Plan, Operating Budget, Capital Works Program. And 2, endorses the upgraded Advocacy Plan as outlined in this report. Do we have somebody who'd like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor Trenery. Councillor Goldsworthy.
I would like to highlight a couple of things in there. This is the halfway point through our budget cycle, and there's some significant documents attached to this recommendation, those being the annual Council Plan Action List, the Advocacy Plan, the Operating Budget and the Capital Works Program. They're what we as Council are all about, because that's what the community told us they want, and so these highlight where we're at with trying to deliver those projects. I do have the one concern, and that's around our current completion rate. You'll see in the documentation it talks about it being around about that 17% for this time of year. I'm assured by the Director for Infrastructure that that will increase dramatically in the coming months. Hopefully hit that 80 to 90% mark. There are a couple of projects to highlight in the document, and it's around the good work by Council in December and January, and that's despite the heavy rain that we had in the northeast in the middle of December. So the Reed Street footpath project in Rutherglen was completed. Stage 1 of the Osmonds Flat School Service Road project. There was drainage upgrades and sealing in Wood Street and Lower, Finch Street and Beechworth. There's urban seal network. There's new pedestrian barriers installed. The Lake King Civil Works tender was awarded. So there's a fair bit going on. So he's hoping that we can do a lot more in the coming months while the weather's so dry.
All right, Councillor Trenery.
I think Councillor Goldsworthy covered just about everything and he did a good job. I was going to ask the Director of Infrastructure to talk about the completion rate, but I think Councillor Goldsworthy covered it very well. We are in a strong position and the end result and the figures highlight that. So very happy with the report, Mr Mayor.
Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against them? Yes, Councillor Shepherd.
There's just a couple of actions that are behind schedule that I just wanted to comment on. The Yakandanda Skate Park redevelopment, which has gone out to tender and it's been accepted, and it looks like it's behind, but the community and council have been working quite hard on that to complete that action, and that's, I think, is within the framework. And the Bells Flat Road upgrade, I think that's going to be put as part now of the Yakandanda placemaking, sorry. So there'll be discussion happens there so that the Yakandanda community have an involvement there. So both those things look as though they're behind schedule, but I think they're still being addressed.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 10.2, the recommendation is the Council adopts the year-end forecast figures for both the operating and capital and directs the CEO to report against these forecast figures for the remainder of the financial year. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor O'Connor. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Goldsworthy?
So the mid-year budget review is often a time where we get approached to add or remove projects in relation to the budget. As you can see from the paperwork, there are a number of projects that will be carried forward to next year, some $2 million worth, I think. And then there's other projects that have been included, like the Yakandanda Public Hall roofing, the Tangam netball courts, and the industrial estate stage 2 planning. These will come at an expense to some other projects and those that aren't progressing. So there will be some people that will feel as though their projects have fallen off the list, but rest assured that we are still looking to deliver on them. A lot of them depend on grants being obtained. So in all, we're in a good position and we'll be in a financially better position by some $179,000 from memory overall in relation to the original budget that was passed by Council.
Okay, Councillor O'Connor. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor O'Connor.
Really, I just confirm what Councillor Goldsworthy said, that most of those new projects have come out of savings from existing projects, so that's great to see. And as Councillor Goldsworthy said, at this time of the year we review the budget to date, and as expected there's a bit of movement in there, so it's great to see some new projects getting up.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 10.3, the recommendation is that Council notes the information provided in response to the request into the feasibility of holding a council meeting at Rutherglen every 3 months. Would somebody like to move that motion? Councillor Trenery, seconder. Councillor Murdoch. Councillor Trenery.
This came about when I requested, I think it was in a November meeting, after talking to some businesses in Rutherglen who were a bit concerned. They weren't seeing the love across there, and we thought this might be a one way of better communications between council and the Rutherglen community. So I did say I'd put to them to see what it would cost and whether it was actually feasible or not. So we've gone ahead and done that.
Okay, Councillor Murdoch.
Yes, and I must admit I've been around so long that I can remember the time when we used to travel around the whole Shire, and that was one of the major reasons that this building was made a permanent home. But it's always good to review things again and make sure that maybe you made the right or the wrong decision. But it's good that they actually want to make sure that council recognises that Rutherglen exists, and it does, because there's a lot of us spend quite a lot of time there.
So, Councillor Price.
I'd just like to highlight that there's a number of other ways that we're getting out to Rutherglen and lots of the other towns within the Shire, but to make particular note of the community development team's recent week that they spent in Rutherglen hot desking, and I hope that we see more opportunities like that for our departments to go and use locations out within the different towns other than Beechworth and Yakandanda. The other thing is, with all of our strategies, with any community engagement that we do, we try to make sure that we go out to each of these towns. So I would hate to think that that just changing the ordinary meeting date every 3 months to the Rutherglen location might solve some of those problems. We're aware of it, and we're really making a conscious effort to look over that way. And I don't think that's resolved by changing the council meeting location.
Thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
I think we've discussed this before. I think Rob McLeish might have brought it up, that the opportunity to perhaps have an input into open forums when you can't attend a meeting. So I think there's a discussion to be had there. If the people in Rutherglen who are speaking to you, Councillor, are concerned that they don't get to present questions or can't attend, then maybe there's another way of them being able to address us through open forum and not attend, and perhaps we need to look into that option.
Would anybody else, Councillor?
I think it's important to note that this is simply this isn't a motion to say that we should or shouldn't hold meetings anywhere else. It is simply saying that this is a look into the feasibility of that. And some of the issues that came up were that if we were to do it in Rutherglen, of course, other locations around the Shire would also rightly want that to happen. That this chamber has been set up purpose-built, including with the technology to allow for live streaming, that wherever you hold a meeting, there are people that can't access it because it's not in the right location. So if we had it in Rutherglen, then the people in Tangam would be even further away, and that may be relevant to them on that meeting's agenda. So while it sounds great in theory, and I fully agree with what Councillor Price was saying, we need to engage with the community the best way we can. And I don't think that this discussion paper says that the best way we can do that is to hold council meetings in Rutherglen.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? So, Councillor Trenery.
I agree with all the comments that have come about so far. This was designed, as the motion says, as a talking piece, really, and I think it's a good thing to talk about. We do need to really work on communication and be open to any improvement in the communication. So I think it served its purpose.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 10.4, the recommendation is that Council accepts the attached Assembly of Councillors records. Somebody like to move that? Moved by Councillor O'Connor, seconded by Councillor Price. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 10.5. The recommendation is that Council acknowledges the receipt of a site master plan for the Mayday Hills precinct at Beechworth.
Sorry, Mayor,
Councillor O'Connor.
I'd like to put up an alternate motion. So do you want to read this one out first and then I'll put up the alternate one, or are you happy for me to just put up an alternate
I'm happy
motion?
for you to speak to it. This is in the agenda anyway, so...
Yeah, okay. So my motion is that Council refuse the proposed camping and caravan park at Mayday Hills on the following grounds. The proposed development would adversely affect the significance of the Mayday Hills complex and compromise its long-term sustainable future. Having regard to the matters raised in the objections received, the proposed use would be incompatible with the surrounding agricultural activities and low-density residential development. Thirdly, the proposal would adversely impact existing uses. Beg your pardon. Fourthly, the proposed access arrangements are unsatisfactory, potentially dangerous, and will have an adverse effect on the existing built fabric of the Mayday Hills complex. The proposal would adversely affect the amenity and the vibe of the surrounding area, and is contrary to orderly and proper planning by creating a housing enclave in a rural zone. The proposal would have an adverse impact on the native vegetation and landscape character of the area. This proposal is contrary to local policy in that it fails to demonstrate that it would support the sustainable use and development of the core area of the Mayday Hills complex. And this proposal is premature in that there is an absence of an agreed long-term strategy for the future development of this strategically important area.
Would somebody like to second that? Seconded by Councillor Goldsworthy. Councillor O'Connor.
Mayday Hills is of paramount significance to the community as a heritage site that is pivotal to the history and the future of Beechworth. This application for a development is not sympathetic to the heritage and cultural value of this important site. We are already dealing with issues about removal of trees, lack of adequate maintenance of buildings, heritage issues, and in fact the illegal construction of a building. You can drive in the front gate and there is a glaring example of the lack of respect for the importance of this site, which is self-evident in the condition of the front fence after years of requests to the owner to replace it, which have been consistently refused and ignored. I have no confidence that this site would be developed in a way that was either sympathetic or in fact in keeping with the conditions that would be set, as we have had examples over and over again of mismanagement of this site.
Okay, Councillor Goldsworthy.
I want the best for this location. I think Mayday Hills is significant. It has a lot to offer in relation to its natural environment and its built environment. I have concerns about how things have been developed thus far, and my reasoning behind supporting this motion is that it will adversely affect the amenity of the area significantly. So I have great respect for some of the parties involved in relation to this development. But unfortunately on this occasion, I can't see that, given the prior history of what's gone on, that this will be developed sympathetically in relation to the current fabric of the facility.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? In that case, I'll vacate the chair.
You can stay there, can you?
No, according to the local law, physically move.
Thank you. You can have my seat.
Just go.
Is anybody against the motion?
I'll speak against the motion, Madam Acting Mayor. Could you talk about, Councillor O'Connor, about the vibe of the area? I think the nearest neighbour's a childcare centre and a couple of residential blocks. I'm just wondering what the amenity and vibe of the surrounding area is.
Is that a question to me?
Yes.
So this development is taking place in Mayday Hills. It's not just about what's immediately next door. This is an incredibly sensitive heritage site full of buildings, trees, landscape, and in fact residents who live here So to put in a caravan park which actually promotes, has already proposed 35 permanent accommodation buildings is in no way in keeping with such a significant heritage site.
The Planning Department, in its recommendation 4, is to approve the planning permit application for a camping and caravan park at Mayday Hills Beechworth, subject to the conditions included in attachment 4. Those attachments are quite binding, and I don't think they would affect the amenity or vibe of the area. The other recommendation is to issue a notice of decision to grant a permit. It also says, taken into account the policy direction and decision guidelines of the relevant state and local planning policy framework from the Indigo planning scheme, recommends that this application be approved. So you're going against that recommendation and against those guidelines?
Yep, I've put forward alternative reasons why. As you have said correctly, there is a recommendation there to say that we should approve it, but there's also an argument for why we should not, and I'm supporting that argument.
Right, Councillor Trenry.
If I can. To Councillor O'Connor, you've got here as one of the objections or part of the motion is that the proposal would adversely impact existing users. Most development would impact existing users in some way. What would be the main adversary impacts of this particular development?
Well, as I've said, this is a significant heritage site. Putting in 35 permanent accommodation, and by definition they would be little cabins like a caravan park, creates a residential site that, while we need residential land in Beechworth, and there's of course a need for affordable housing, this goes against all the tenets of that, which are that housing should be dispersed within and among the community. This is setting up virtually a ghetto situation. There's a lot of concern from the community about that, and I'm responding to that concern by raising it here tonight and refusing the application.
Thank you.
Right, is there any more comment?
Could I just ask a question of the mover?
Yes, you can.
You state that the proposal is premature. Why is that?
I believe, in conversation with people in this community, that we really need a community consultation around the planning for the future of this site. I fully understand that this site has been bought by a private developer, but that person got up when this site was being purchased and spoke to the entire community. There were hundreds of people at that meeting, guaranteeing that he would respect the site, that he would look after the trees, that he was going to develop this site in a sympathetic way. That has not happened, and I think it's time that the community once again was actually given some opportunity to talk about the issues that they see as important for this site, and for the developer to have an opportunity to talk about how he's going to live up to what he originally guaranteed to this community, and which I'm hearing constantly from people that they feel let down by.
Right, are there any more questions or people wanting to make a statement? No? Then I'll put the motion. All those in favour of the motion? Oh, sorry. Sorry, you're right.
Thanks, Councillor. I think I've said enough.
Yeah. I was taking that as a no. All those in favour of the motion? Those against? The motion is lapsed or passed. Not lapsed, passed. Carried.
Division.
Division. All those in favour of the motion? You take the names. Councillor Shepherd, Councillor Goldsworthy, Councillor Price, and Councillor O'Connor, and Councillor Murdoch. All those against? Councillor Trenary and Councillor Mayor, sorry. Thank you. Gaffney.
Thank you, Madam Acting. Item 10.6, the recommendation is the Council notes the Coo Springs Water Extraction Facility Monitoring Report content and the action undertaken where required. Would somebody like to move that motion, that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Shepherd, seconded by Councillor Murdoch. That's right, Councillor Shepherd. That's right. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.1, the recommendation is the Council adopts the attached Complaint Handling Policy 2019. Councillor Price.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to move the motion and make an amendment to add that we review the policy at the time that the Victorian Ombudsman completes their inquiry that they've currently got going on complaint handling across the 79 councils. If someone can tidy up those words. So I'll move that, Mr Mayor.
Could the Executive Officer read that back, please?
Would you like me to try again?
Yeah, I think we just need to know what we're voting for.
So I'd like to add an amendment that says that we review the policy after the Victorian Ombudsman completes their inquiry into the complaint handling processes of the 79 councils. Thank you.
Would somebody like to second that amendment? That's right, Councillor Murdoch. That's right, Councillor Price.
Thank you. A complaint handling policy is a really important tool that we have. It really is another tool in our community engagement. It's important that we have an appropriate policy in place to handle complaints, because complaints are feedback and we appreciate feedback from the community. This policy was developed in line with the best practice guidelines from 2015 from the Victorian Ombudsman, but it's just coincidence that they're currently being updated, and so that's where my amendment comes from. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
All right, Councillor Murdoch.
I think it's sensible to pass it now and then to review it once we get some more information. So I think that's a pretty logical way to go. Thank you.
Would someone... Yes, Councillor O'Connor.
Just to say that we do need a policy, and even if it's not perfect, it's good to have the policy in place to guide the staff and to give the community an idea that we are very open to hearing their complaints. And I absolutely support Councillor Price's amendment that we want to make sure that the policy is upgraded to make, or is in line with best practice once the Ombudsman hands down those kind of guidelines.
Would somebody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Trenery.
I'd just like to note that probably over the period of time I've been on council, the complaints handling has improved out of sight from when I first started. So, and this is part of that continual improvement. So happy to recommend the motion.
Would someone else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 12.1, the recommendation is that the former library at 1 Harper Avenue, Beechworth be made available for lease. 2, that the rental sought be a full commercial return at market rates. 3, that the CEO be authorised to execute a lease agreement with a suitable tenant, subject to the requirements of Section 190 and Section 223 of the Local Government Act 1989. Somebody like to move? Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor O'Connor. Councillor Goldsworthy.
This block of land's been on the agenda for a long time now. It's served a number of purposes throughout its time, the most destructive of which was a location for a gasworks and the subsequent fill. It does provide a millstone around Council's neck in relation to ongoing testing for the site. We've looked at different alternatives, and this is the most cost-effective and, if left in situ, the safest way to deal with the site at the moment. So it hopefully will provide a location for a business to flourish. It is a good spot. Just don't dig the soil too deep.
Councillor O'Connor.
I agree with what Councillor Goldsworthy is saying. This site is quite a fraught one for us in terms of the fact that it has been contaminated. However, it also provides a great opportunity. So I think this is a very sensible way through where by leasing it out, it helps to recoup the costs to council for management of the site, at the same time providing an opportunity commercially to a local business to utilise that site. I'd also note that, yes, there are people in the community that have hoped that the site would be made available for community use. And, you know, under different circumstances, that might have been a good outcome, but we have to recoup $20,000 a year just to maintain the EPA tests on that. But we are also conscious of the fact that community meeting space and things are really important, and we're continually looking at ways that we can do that. But in this particular case, this is a good way of managing the contamination testing costs and allowing an opportunity for a business.
Would somebody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd.
For a while there, we were really keen on getting the whole thing cleaned up. But then when we looked at the cost and saw that it wouldn't necessarily, we couldn't be assured that there'd be nothing left even after that clean up. It obviously was not the way to go. So sadly, a total clean-up is just not going to work in this case. So I support this.
Would someone else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. I asked him. He said he did. You can't sum up. You're the seconder. Item 12.2, the recommendation is the Council endorses the distribution of $20,000 under the 2018-19 Community Facility Energy Upgrade Grant Program as follows. The Yackandandah Sports Park Committee of Management, installation of battery storage. Beechworth Community Childcare, upgrade of heating and cooling equipment. 3, Yackandandah Football and Netball Club, LED lighting upgrade. Yackandandah Netball Courts. And 4, the Rutherglen Agricultural Society, upgrade of heating and cooling equipment. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? It's moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, second by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Goldsworthy.
This is a really good news topic, actually. This is something that's come out of our council. It hasn't been carried over. Last year, we were lobbied by the Waggunya Sport and Rec Committee in relation to their solar power and their upgrade. We felt that we needed a strategy to deal with that and that we should develop a grants process. We've done this. I'm hopeful that in the future we'll be able to expand it. It's good for our local community, it's good for our community groups. It lessens their ongoing costs, and it means they can put more money into the things that matter, their sporting equipment and alike. So it's really good news, and congratulations to the clubs and facilities that have been nominated or will be the recipients.
Councillor Shepherd.
Really, just to reiterate what you said, we were concerned of just handing money out willy-nilly without some sort of criteria and assessment around this, because we know that there's lots of community groups that are keen to have these sort of energy-saving additions, whether it be solar or whatever. So we now have a list of criteria, that assessment criteria and weighting, and we can very much look at the 6 applications that came. And it's a shame we couldn't give money to all 6. But congratulations to the 5, sorry, was it? 4 that received it.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Price.
The only thing I'd say is this is an example of council, I think, following ironically, the energy that's in the community. There's an appetite for this this sort of grant, and as Councillor Goldsworthy quite rightly said, after the decision we made last year around Waganya, I think we can be really proud of the process that's come back now. It's very thorough, and I hope that we can extend it, as he said.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Goldsworthy? Councillor Trenery?
It's hard to follow up. I agree with absolutely everything that the council have been saying. It's been well executed, and I think that there has to be an understanding of how important these things are. There's a lot of community groups that are struggling for both volunteers and dollars, and this is a direct help to them. It is a really practical solution in a lot of different levels, so I just congratulate everyone involved.
Would anybody else like to speak? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 13.1. It's quite a long recommendation. The recommendation is that Council delegates to the members of Council staff holding, acting in or performing the duties of the positions referred to in the attached instrument of delegation to members of Council staff the powers, duties and functions set out in that instrument, subject to the conditions and limitations specified in that instrument. It goes on to mention that it authorises the CEO to affix Council's common seal. It revokes all previous delegations, notes that the duties and functions set out in the instrument must be performed and powers set out in the instrument must be executed in accordance with any guidelines or policies of Council. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Shepherd, second by Councillor Trenery. It's interesting, it's a 122-page document. You'll mention all the points in there. So, Councillor Shepherd.
So basically this is swapping around all the positions and then giving them the stamp of approval that they're allowed to work in there and use the delegation that goes with that office. So in January 2019, we underwent some changes to our organisational structure. The changes took effect in 29th of January. There are no net changes to staffing levels. However, realignment of some portfolios and reporting lines has necessitated some role and department title changes. These changes impact the instruments of delegations, requiring changes to some titles and reporting lines. So there are no legislative changes, just changes of roles and delegation.
Councillor Trenery.
Just to probably comment saying that there's no increased delegation from council to staff. It's exactly the same. The changes are basically names and dates within the document. It's a long way of saying that in that recommendation, but that's essentially what it is.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? So, Councillor Shepherd, do you wish to sum up?
There is a note that I probably should say that there are no changes to the Infrastructure Directorate aside from a minor change to the Buller Gas reporting line, which is now part of assets and property, if anyone was concerned.
Thanks very much for that. Would anybody else like to speak? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 13.2, the recommendation is, in the exercise of the powers conferred by Section 224 of the Local Government Act 1989 and the other legislation referred to in the attached instruments of appointment and authorisation, Indigo Shire Council resolves, and it mentions there that Greg Pinkerton, the Director of Planning and Corporate Services, be appointed and authorised. The instrument comes into force immediately. The common seal of council is affixed. And Mark Florence's appointment and authorisation granted under Section 1474 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987 be revoked. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Recommendation by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor O'Connor. Councillor Price.
Not nearly as dramatic as that, Mr Mayor. Again, related to the restructure, and I think the paragraph, the purpose of the report, sums it up pretty well. The purpose of this report and the attached instrument is to ensure Council has the correct appointments and authorisations in place under the Planning and Environment Act, and that they reflect the current organisational structure.
Councillor O'Connor.
I think it's probably timely to thank Mark Florence for his work as the Director of Planning for how many years, Mark? 10. I'm sure it's with a heavy heart that you handed over to Greg Pinkerton, who is now the new Director for Planning. So congratulations to you, Mr Pinkerton, and I look forward to working under the new structure, or with the new structure, sorry, as a councillor, and seeing the way the new duties roll out with both of you in your new roles. Congratulations.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Price. We always like to see planning applications come to council. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. The recommendation is that council receives and notes the resolution of the attached unconfirmed advisory committee minutes and endorses the officer comments. Would somebody like to move that? Moved by Councillor Trenery, seconded by Councillor Murdoch. Councillor Trenery.
Obviously, this is an important part of the process in regards to the hard work that these volunteers do, just to make sure that we recognise and note some of the very important information in some of these minutes. Thank you.
Councillor Murdoch.
I chair the Indigo Shire Community Grants and Awards Advisory Committee, and if every committee member in all of these committees puts the same effort, it's like they're spending their own money. They're very, very thorough with what they do. They research everything, and it's a real pleasure to be sitting on that committee with them. So, and I'm sure that we're lucky to have people who volunteer that to help us along. I think that's great. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Trenery? No. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 14.1 is a notice of motion from Councillor Goldsworthy.
Right, I'd like to move the motion that Council directs the CEO to include information in the end-of-season pool report on 1, how many times and where this season the council pools have not opened on time in accordance with published or agreed opening times, including an explanation as to why. How will council work with Vic Swim to ensure our young people learning to swim have the opportunity to participate in a well-organised program with sufficient placements? How the lifeguards will undertake their duties for which they are paid, supervising the pools and not undertaking personal activities. 4, an evaluation on the position of the leading senior lifeguard at each of the pools. 5, an evaluation on the merits of continuing to use Momentum 1 to provide staff for the pools. 6, an evaluation of the OH&S practices at the pools relating to staff hours, rotation of duties, shade and working conditions during days of extreme heat. 7, an explanation on the proactive maintenance of the pools and surrounds. And 8, an explanation on the stock control and inconsistencies between pools regarding the accountability of cash.
Would somebody like to second that motion? Seconded by Councillor Trenery.
I'd just like to say before I do actually second it, is I've never seconded a motion for the sake of discussion or sake of debate, but I'm doing it on this occasion. I think it's important that some of these things are spoken about.
Well, you are seconding the motion. Yep. Councillor Goldsworthy.
So the explanatory comments that I've provided provide some detail in relation to it. I'm prepared to go into further detail if required, but I won't at this stage name names. The issues that I've raised in the notice of motion are around the level of service that is provided to the community, and predominantly my concern is the lack of attention given to our pools by council. The notice of motion asks for information to be provided and an evaluation made, that is all. Whereas councillors have the right to request information from council activities, and particularly when they present a significant risk. I want the broader community to know that we are concerned about our pools, their upkeep and the safety of the patrons. To highlight my concerns, consider these figures. There are an average of 285 drowning deaths each year in Australian waterways, with swimming pools the 4th leading location for fatal drownings. Between July 2005 and June 2015, 78 people drowned in communal pools and public and commercial swimming pools. Of these, 42 drownings deaths occurred in communal pools and 36 occurred in public and commercial pools. In 2/3 of the drowning cases, at least one lifeguard was present. Between the same time period, there were 362 cases of non-fatal drownings in communal pools and public and commercial swimming pools. Of these, 105 cases of the non-fatal drownings occurred in communal pools and 257 in public and commercial pools. The most at-risk group is those aged between 0 and 4. What I want for our pools is for them to be safe and well-maintained pools. In addition to the ordinary report that we get from Council in relation to the end of the end of season pool report, I'm just looking for those additional items to be addressed. I'm not asking for any particular length to be taken, just the explanation to be given as to what's occurred.
Councillor Trenery. Does anybody wish to speak to the motion? That's right, Councillor Goldsworthy. Sorry, Councillor O'Connor.
The issue that I have with this motion is not to do with the concerns that you have raised, Councillor Goldsworthy, and I share them. The issue I have is that it's come up as a notice of motion rather than a request for a briefing to Council. I fully support that we get that information, but I also believe that in terms of governance, the fact that you've mentioned an organisation, a private company in this, it actually is, it's potentially a risk to Council. So for that reason, I'm not supporting the motion as a motion, but I will absolutely support your request for a briefing to Council.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Trenery.
I don't know whether Councillor Goldsworthy is happy whether I second this motion or not, but I agree with Councillor O'Connor. It was probably something that's highly operational, and I really want to say that out loud, which is why I want to second it. I think that we as a council have looked to get organisations in that may provide the same service at a cheaper rate or the same service at a more inexpensive rate. And I think that this has been one of the success stories. But in saying that, I understand Councillor Goldsworthy's concerns also, but this would have been good if it came up to a briefing meeting to go through.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Goldsworthy.
So my reason for raising this as a notice of motion is around the transparency of it. I believe that the community needs to know that we're advocating on their behalf and that we're looking at these issues. There's been considerable concern raised over the season. There's been a lot of traffic on the community Facebook page as to why the pool wasn't open at certain times, and certainly there's a lot of people that missed out on their children getting into Vic Swim. I think it's really important that we promote these programs, and we need to promote our pools as best we can, and we need to examine these things critically. And so for that reason, it was raised in the public forum, and I ask that you do support it so that we can certainly ensure that it's included in the end of season report.
I put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Lost? Division? All those in favour? Which is Councillor Goldsworthy and Councillor O'Connor. All those against? Councillor Trenery, Shepherd, Gaffney, Murdoch and Price. Item 15.1 is the Mayor's Diary. Do you have any questions? Item 16.1 is for information only. That's the Decisions Register, which is a new initiative of this council. Item 18, the resolution that Council resolves that the ordinary meeting of Council move into confidential session in accordance with section 89.2A, 89.2D and 89.2H of the Local Government Act 1989. Would somebody like to move that motion? What's not? Yes. Item 17, general business. Thanks very much for that, Councillor.
Do you want me to start? I'm happy to start with general business.
Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Trenery. I was going to start beside you. But...
We are very close though. I'd just like to, if I could, ask the Mayor write a letter on behalf of the community at Tangambalanga Kiwa to representatives at the NBN and also our local federal member, Cathy McGowan, in regards to the backhaul capacity of the NBN at Kiwa Tangambalanga. The backhaul capacity does not have the ability to service all of the current people in Kiwa Tangambalanga. And so with the expansion, it's increasing so rapidly, the service of the NBN is going to get even worse into the future. It is being a hindrance to local businesses. We'd all like to see more businesses start up. We're looking at expanding industrial areas in Kiwa Tangambalanga. These places will need NBN and fast NBN. So I'd just like you to, if you could, advocate on behalf of that town through writing a letter to both Cathy and also the NBN.
Would somebody like to second that motion? Seconded by Councillor.
I'm happy to make it a motion if you like, yeah. I was just asking you to write a letter, but I'm happy to move a motion. I don't know whether it's urgent or... Sure. So to probably get rid of the preamble, to write a letter to NBN and Cathy McGowan in regards to the slow capacity or the backhaul capacity at the Kiwa Tangambalanga Tower.
That's right, seconded by Councillor O'Connor. Is anybody against the motion? Does anybody else want to speak to the motion? The motion's just before it's carried. I'd just like to say I'd be very pleased to address those issues with those people.
Thank you.
If nobody's against the motion, carried. No, Councillor O'Connor. Councillor Goldsworthy.
I'd just like to acknowledge the efforts of Clem Angus, who's been recently featured in a couple of newspaper articles. He placed gold leaf on the two of our monuments in town, and they look fantastic. That's the golden horseshoes and the pan, shovel and pick up in the main street. And if you haven't seen them, you can in daylight from about 300 metres away. They're glistening just like gold. So well done, and well done to the Shire for commissioning that. Very appreciative. And the other thing is I thought it was a terrific work on the fence that's been put up in Albert Road over the Spring Creek, just near the Beechworth Bowls Club. Once again, there's a tree that was fallen over. The fence was in disrepair and it now looks terrific. So good job to the Director of Infrastructure and his team.
Councillor Murdoch. Councillor Price.
Just to recognise Wes Canny, who has just received the Gallagher Victorian Community Coach of the Year. I'll read the little piece that's on the website here. Wes coaches rowing at Corowa Rowing Club, unfortunately, on the Murray River. He coaches across all levels, from beginners to national champions. Wes is a tireless worker and is involved in all aspects of the rowing club, from on-water activities to the day-to-day running of the club. Wes is committed to setting up appropriate training programs for rowers of all abilities and regularly undertakes professional development training, understanding the great value this has on all athletes. We come into contact with Wes a lot in our council business, and I think I can speak on behalf of councillors to say that we're really pleased that he's won this, and it's really deserved. And also, I'd like to highlight that his contribution to rowing in the area is always on show at the Mudamere Regatta each year. And this year he coached the Victorian National Sprint Open Championship, not in that order, but he had a rower competing in that race and they won. So that race is conducted at Lake Mudamere, and we had the winner from Rutherglen rowing for Corowa. So rowing's a really important sport in that part of the Shire, and it's really nice to see that volunteers, community coaches can be recognised at this level. So congratulations to Wes.
I'd just like to add a champion award for a champion bloke. He does so much for the youth of Indigo Shire and across the river. He is an outstanding asset to the Shire. Councillor O'Connor.
Sorry, can I just have one more?
Oh, sorry.
I'd just like to also make mention of the Rainbow Ball. We've mentioned it before, and it's got great coverage. I think it's important to say that this was Indigo Shire led. We're really proud of our youth officer that's led this, and I think I can say that this is one of the biggest impacts that we've had so far as a Shire, and I don't think we can really recognise how much of an impact it has. The youth officer quoted some Headspace statistics that are quite alarming, and I think that us showing our support of this community and these sorts of events means more than we know, and I can't wait to see the Rainbow Ball in years to come, hopefully again led by Indigo Shire.
I'd just like to add, this is not your fan club, Councillor Price, but I'd like to agree it was an amazing event, and I was so pleased to speak at it, and all those involved, particularly the youth officer from Indigo Shire who got the grant from the state government, Sal Kimber, she's to be congratulated. Councillor O'Connor?
Yeah, concur with all of that. I would just like to raise the issue that the Golden Horseshoes Festival has had some concerns raised in the community, and there has been quite a bit of misinformation and misunderstanding happening. Firstly, I would like to thank the volunteers on that committee who have worked incredibly hard with very, very little support. Indigo Shire is involved by offering both cash to the committee and some in-kind work around planning, but the actual festival, of course, is organised by that committee. There is a proposed change of route. It has caused some concern, which I acknowledge. However, I believe there was a meeting today with Shire and business owners, and to talk about what in fact is going to happen. I think it's really important to understand that this is only for this year. There's nothing set in concrete into the future around this, but there is an attempt to address some of the issues that have risen over recent times around safety with traffic, with kids being close to motorised floats and that kind of thing. So there have been problems. They are trying to be addressed, and I think the committee has done a fantastic job, and I don't think they've been acknowledged for that in the community.
I have some urgent business. That Indigo Shire has the worst response time for urgent ambulance call-outs in Victoria. There is only a 27% chance of crews responding to a Code 1 emergency call in less than 15 minutes. That 27% mark is right across the Shire. The CEO and I met with the Hume Regional Director, who informed us that this is a resources issue and that Ambulance Victoria has no plan for extra resources in Indigo Shire. This cannot continue. We deserve better. I'm asking a councillor to move an urgent motion that we write to the Minister for Ambulance Services, the Honourable Jenny Makakis, and request a meeting to address this most important issue. Would somebody move by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor O'Connor? Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Councillor Price.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, could you just make your comparison with the Alpine Shire as well, please?
Yes. Indigo Shire has one ambulance and one paramedic on duty at any one time. He's on call. We're of similar population to Alpine Shire and are of similar size. They've got an ambulance and paramedic based at Mount Beauty, an ambulance and paramedic at Bright, an ambulance and paramedic at Myrtleford. They've got a response time of in excess of 44%. Indigo Shire has one ambulance, one paramedic based in Beechworth. It's just not good enough. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Now, Councillor Trennery, can I get back to that? The recommendation is that the ordinary meeting of council move into confidential session in accordance with section 89.2A, 89.2D and 89.2H of the Local Government Act 1989. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor O'Connor, seconded by Councillor Murdoch. Is anybody against? Carried. Thank you for your attendance. We will be coming back, but it might be a while. Would somebody like to move the recommendation that council move out of confidential session? Moved by Councillor Trenery, seconded by Councillor Murdoch. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. I now declare the meeting closed.